Hello, my name is Tej van Pettinger from Economics Help, and today we're going to look at ways to reduce inflation. In theory, there are three main ways to control inflation: monetary policy, fiscal policy, supply side policies. But in practice, in the Western world, central banks tend to focus on monetary policy. So if the central bank feels that inflation is a problem, that the economy is overheating and this is causing inflationary pressures, then the first thing the central bank can do is to increase interest rates. Higher interest rates reduce inflation for quite a few reasons. Firstly, borrowing will be more expensive, and so consumers will tend to spend less on credit. Also, people with mortgages will be paying more interest payments, which means at the end of the month they have less disposable income to spend on other things. So these factors tend to cause lower consumer spending. Then firms will also be affected because with higher interest rates, more expensive to borrow, so a firm may have to cut back on investment projects. So with lower spending, lower investment, this would tend to reduce aggregate demand or slow the growth rate down. And so with less demand in the economy, the growth rate will slow down, and this reduces inflationary pressure. Because if there's less demand, firms won't be able to put up prices as much. There won't be as much upward pressure on wages. In theory, the government could control inflation by using fiscal policy. Higher taxes, lower spending, both will tend to reduce aggregate demand. But in practice, this rarely happens because the government doesn't want the political unpopularity of having to increase taxes every time inflation goes up. If inflation is a sustained problem in an economy, if there is cost-push inflation and inefficiency, then economists may suggest supply-side policies as a way to reduce inflation. So, for example, if you implement policies of privatization, then the new private firms will in theory look for ways to cut costs, be more efficient, and hopefully this will lead to lower prices in the long term. Or if unions are very powerful and they're pushing wages up, causing wage inflation, then a supply-side policy to reduce the influence of unions and to keep wage growth lower will also help to reduce inflation. Now, the thing to bear in mind with supply-side policies is that they will take quite a long time to have any effect, and there's no guarantee that even policies like privatization and deregulation will actually succeed in reducing inflation. So when inflation is an issue, the first step is usually monetary policy, higher interest rates. Other policies could include trying to control the money supply. This is a big element of monetarism, and they say there's a strong link between the money supply growth and inflation. So if you simply control the amount of money in the economy, then you will control inflation. Now, in practice, the link between the money supply and inflation isn't clear-cut, and it can be easier said than done to control the money supply. And the final way to reduce inflation that I will mention is to reduce inflation expectations. If you expect high inflation, 6, 7, 8%, then firms will want to be increasing their prices by 6, 7, 8%, and workers will want to increase their wages to keep up with living costs. But if a central bank comes in and says we're going to target low inflation come what may, and if people in the economy believe they're going to do it, if they believe inflation is going to be 2%, it actually makes it much easier to achieve inflation of 2%. And that's why many governments gave control of monetary policy to an independent central bank. In the UK government used to set interest rates, but with varying degrees of success, and there used to be an element of boom and bust. the government didn't want to increase interest rates just before an election. But the central bank doesn't have to worry about political pressures. So if they feel inflation is a problem, they can increase interest rates, even if it's unpopular with homeowners. So just to summarise, if inflation is a problem, the central bank will tend to increase interest rates. And this will have the effect of slowing the economy down, taking the heat out of it, so that there's less inflationary pressures in the economy.